Okay, welcome to Yeshiva Daf. We're holding in Basra Daf Kuf Dalet. We're starting in Daf Kuf Gimel base immediately after the Mishnah. Zok the Gemara. Ibailu base score stomo mai. Meaning, our Mishnah said a case. Someone sells a base score and it says Mida Bechel will give you the exact measurement. So you have to give an exact measurement, not more, not less. But if he said hen choser and yeser, more or less, says the words more or less. So then you can give him a little more, a little less. What happens? He did not say nothing. He didn't say exact. He didn't say mida b'chevel. And he also didn't say more or less. What's it in then? Says the Gemara, Toshma. Beiskura, look at a Mishnah. Beiskura, for any mochilecho, mida b'chevel. Says exact measurement. When daf kudav on top. Poches kol shu yinake. If it went down a little bit, you subtract. Yes, a kol shu yachzel. Hastomo, but if it's exact, I mean, if it didn't say anything, okay, so that's like saying more or less. Let's look at the next part. The next part of the Mishnah says, if he said more or less, even if he added up to a roiva per sale, or less, mashma stomo is like saying exact. No, there's no right for our Mishnah. One way or another, there's no right. Says the Gemara, Toshma, Beiskur offer ani moichelecho, kev Beiskur offer ani moichelecho. So the Mishnah now understands, the Gemara understands, each one is a line on its own. I said Beiskur, or I said kev Beiskur, or I said in Chesed and Yetzer ani moichelecho. So in all these cases, I feel piches roiva l'seyo, hoisi roiva l'seyo yigiyot. If I went down a roiva, added a roiva, it worked. It's fine. If I just said base score, that means and chosen yasser. It's the same thing. It's all one of the list. So no, you're not reading it right. This verse. What's a base score which is not exactly base score? If he said the words more or less, but if you don't say the word more or less, not necessarily you have any right from here. It says animorcha 3 times. It says base score animorcha, kev score animorcha, and chaseiras animorcha. I have to say animorcha. It's all one long sentence. And la shvami no stami nami ke chasei yesadami shvami no. So when you see from here that when a person sells a field, if I didn't say otherwise, it means more or less. Doesn't mean exact. Unless I said bechevel. Says the one so he has to give him back money. Leapos, so says the one second. Leapos kodesh shemoicher amino. Leapos kodesh lokech lo amino. So in our Mishnah we said clearly that the seller is the one who gains. Because the seller can choose, does he want to get his land back, or he wants to get the money back? Masha the lokech can't. Meaning, let's talk about the lokech can't. If the lokech, he bought a land, and he was supposed to get a certain amount, and he got less. Now he wants the extra. You can't tell the seller, give me money or give me the land. That's the amount that we said comes out to roiva l'seyo. Together, roiva l'seyo times 30 comes out to be 7.5. Higir. Then we said it's fine. We force the seller to sell. So the seller needs to sell it, and to take care of the buyer. And Mash, we're comparing the seller to the buyer, right? So now look at the Losha of the Rashbam. Says the Rashbam is the right side towards the end of the narrow lines. The Rashbam says like this. It's the same way, we don't want the seller to have a land in the middle of nowhere. Over there, want to come to the I want to buy this extra little piece of land because I don't want the seller to go around it. If the seller doesn't lose, that's a little small piece. So you say the same thing, that the buyer can demand from the seller, give me the land. So why you told me only the seller can demand from the buyer that he wants either money or land, and now the opposite, you see the buyer can also. Says the Gemara also, so I'll tell you what happened. The land used to be expensive. Now it went down in value. And therefore what? So what does that mean? So the Rashbam says nothing like the Pashup shot of the Gemara. Pashup shot, we're not changing our opinion. This is not like a Pashup shot of the Gemara. Look at the Lashon Rashbam. Mishani Hosum Kiyo Davi Akiyo. We're only doing for the seller. We do not force the seller to sell, ever. If he undersells, we give it back money. So the seller can ask for the kaka. Now he has to sell in the land. But the land used to be expensive, now it went down in value. The what? And he said like this. You want the land back. Based on what? Based on the original value. But now the land went down in value. So I don't want to give you the value of what used to be. I want to give you the value which is now. That's what it means. The seller needs to sell means the seller needs to give up what is right because we go based on today's value. Says the Gemara, says no, we have to give him like the share they took from him. Right? So the Gemara also goes, then it's the opposite case. The karka was very cheap and it went up in value. So the first case, it was expensive and went down in value. So the seller cannot force the buyer to give him like the original value. Now we're talking about the opposite, that it was cheap in the beginning and became more expensive. Right? Look at Lashon Rashbam, third wide line. Why is it like this? You know why I bought this land? Because it was a cheap price. Now it became more expensive. I'm not interested. So therefore what? So the has a time to so the whole discussion is regarding the seller. The seller can tell the buyer either money or the seller has the right to choose either money or karka. But the buyer has the right to say, if it went down in value, I want it to be based on today's value. And if it went up in value, he wants to say, he can say, I want it to be based on what I'm gaining. In other words, I bought it for a lower value. I don't want to buy it now for the more expensive value. So the seller has the right to choose money or karka as long as the lokech doesn't lose anything. If the lokech has a loss because the value changed, then the seller does not have the right. That's what Rashbam learns this sugya. So they want shivshir b'karka b'tzodet tibes tes kovim. So we saw in the Mishnah, you have 9 kav, then the seller must take that because that's a field on its own. Meaning, it doesn't matter how large the field is. When you have 9 kav, it's a chasot achoshev ne'atzmi. Shivo kavin umechzo the kol kur v'kur. Says no, it goes based on every measurement. So for every kur you do 7.5 is okay, 9 is not okay. So if if you have 2 kurim, you have to have 18 in order to have a solid choshev yatzlo. Okay, so he says the Gemara. Maybe just see the Rashbam over here. Afilu bika gdoil, says the Rashbam, shemachzeket yud kurin koma demachzir karka, abed lo yitir ben akol tet kavi. The seal Ravuna de roiva l'sea v'mechilo, tfeila v'mechilo has the cheshbon. Once you get to a certain amount, there's no mechilo. That's where he goes. And then he goes on. Let's see, continue the Rashbam. It says, "Fei milayim devarim diiket fei mireva l'sea has the cheshbon. Adematet is calling down chazor. The Hani mean the base school. Ave shnei korim nechika roiva l'choseo. Have tfei mites kavin kol kach vadim chasod da'achas l'moch inish. So here, this is the sentence was missing before. We said that for every sale, you give a roi v'akav. So if I have a core, I have 30 sale. 30 sale, how many kavim is it? Quarter times 30, 7.5. Okay? Now what happens if I'm selling you 2 korim? Now the amount that should be in a measurement should be 7.5 times 2, which is 15. Says Ravuna, no. Once I get to 9 kavim, it's a sodi b'fnei atzma. Sodi b'fnei atzma, I'm not moichel. Right? You have to exil kol karka. Once you reach tes kavim, you give it back. It's too much. As the Rashbam that we just read said, "Avashtei kurim nechika roiv l'chosea v'tfei tes kavim kol kark v'adayin mechir sod da'achas lo yimochel inish b'ez not moichel oi b'yesh v'moisach chashiv l'sodi v'yechzil karka." So again, for every core, you give a maximum of 7.5 because it's a quarter per se. But if I have 2 korim, it's 15. 15 is too much. Once I reach 9, I can't. There's no mechila anymore. Rav Nachman says Shiva's korim metzach whole core. No, says Rav Nachman. No. Every core gets 7.5 kavim. If I sell you 2 korim, 15 kavim. Sell you 3 kavim, I get 22.5. I go for each one 7.5. Continues the Gemara of Kudal and Beis, a very interesting shape of a Gemara, because no traces him. Ve'iko milso yesereso latisha kavin hadre. Once I have more than roiva for each sale, and now it's more than 9, you give it back right away. Now you have no liquor. So in other words, according to Rav Nachman, I'm going to do a cheshbon based, I give you a roiva for every sale, regardless of how many sales I'm selling you. But once I have a little more than roiva for the sale, if it's 9 kavim, you have to give it back. So now Rabbi asked Rav Nachman that said that we're going based on every sale. It says in our Mishnah, once I get to 9 kavim, it's no mechila. Aren't we talking about that he's sold in 2 kurim? That once you get to 9 kavim, even though it's less than a roiva per se, it's still a mechila. Talk about a core, but if you sold 2 kurim, you have more leeway. Uvigino beit chatzikav, because beit chatzikav is the size of a garden. They sold him 2 seyas. So now, in other words, the same measurement you have by a field, you have by a garden. So by a garden, for every sale of garden, I have a chatzikav. If Mishai chatzikav, there's no mechila. If I say 2 seyas, so it's already no mechila. Like the zomin lay sale. Sold him a sale, but if sold 2 sale, you have more leeway. Again, because according to Rabbi Kiva, it's a roiva per sale. Like the zomin lechatzi sale. In other words, if you sell them a sale, you have more. The mechila that we have, what's the mechilikas here that we have between Ravuna and Nachman? When I have a mechila, do I have a mechila for everything I sell you, or I have a mechila until it gets to a total amount, which I'm not mechila, and that's the mechilikas. Now we learned that there's a certain mechila you have for a field and a certain mechila you have for a garden. What happens if I have a garden that turned to, or I have a field turned into a garden? The Rashbam explains a lot of water is all around it and it turned to be a garden. It grew a river around it. Or the opposite, it dried out. Do I go, how much mechila do I have? Do I have mechila based on the time of the sale or based on the time of later? Says the Rashbam, the whole cheshbon is, why are you doing a cheshbon? Right? The seller and the buyer sold. He said, oops, we made a mistake here. So they started the cheshbon, and then something changed. But once the sale was complete, and there was a mechila, so then for sure, we're not going to continue. Then you don't go back to what it was before. If the field is right near a sadeh of either the seller or the buyer, even the smallest one, give him a karka. Why? The whole idea that we saw in the Mishnah that the seller could say, I want money in a karka, it's such a small field, I don't want it. But if the small field is next to another field that he owns, you give him back a karka. Now what happens if between that small field and his big field, there's something in between? The more brings a few options. What happens if you have a pit? Is that a stop? Which is a little larger, as we saw before in the Masechta. A place where rabbis walk. It's not Rishus Rabbim, said the Rashbam, but it's a large place. We have a lot of trees stuck together. Each one, says the Rashbam, is a little more. Is that a separation between the small field and the big field? And the Gemara says in all these cases, take. So this line in the Mishnah doesn't make any sense. Rashi says, not only the roiva that you have mechila giving back, you're giving everything else. What do you mean? The roiva is what he's mechil. If you have more than the roiva, so I say give you back the more, and then once you give back the more, you give back the roiva as well. The other one says klapilai. Where is it turning to? Meaning the losh of the Mishnah doesn't make sense. You don't give back the roiva. So the more Tana Rabbi Bar Nachman klapilai means where is it facing? It's facing to the wrong direction. So the more Tana Rabbi Nachman lo yisa moisa bilvad nachzeloi. It's not giving back only the moisa, elis kol revoim kulon. You have mechila for roiva perseyo. That's only if you didn't have any extra. You had extra. So now you give back not only the extra, you give back also the roiva. If you remember earlier in the Masechta, earlier a few topics ago, the one was asking, when a person made a mistake, do you give back only the extra or everything else? The one wanted to bring a right from here, and the more said maybe by a soda is different. And this is the more saying, that's what we say in this Mishnah, once you give back the extra, give back everything, even the parts that usually are mechila. The second Rabbi say, we'll stop over here, continue Beis Hashem tomorrow night. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful week, and a Gemara Chasima Tova.